Coffee and Cream. Chapter 1. Bobby Joe Jenkins stepped off the Greyhound bus onto the teeming sidewalks of New York City, clutching his suitcase and wearing a hopeful smile that seemed incongruous amidst the sea of hurried faces. His cowboy boots clicked on the pavement, a distinct rhythm in the cacophony of city sounds. The towering skyscrapers loomed above, casting long shadows that stretched across the streets like fingers, as if to welcome, or perhaps warn, this newcomer from Alabama. The air was a blend of car exhaust, street food, and an indefinable energy that Bobby Joe had never experienced back home. His heart thrummed with excitement, fueled by dreams that had kept him awake on the long bus ride over. He had imagined this moment for years, ever since he first saw New York City light up the screen in his favorite sitcoms. But standing there, in the flesh, the reality was both more intimidating and more exhilarating than he had ever imagined. He maneuvered through the crowd with a mixture of awe and determination, his southern drawl turning heads whenever he stopped to ask for directions. His first stop was the address of the apartment he had rented sight unseen, a decision that now seemed as reckless as it was necessary. The apartment, a tiny fifth-floor walk-up in a building that had seen better days, was barely bigger than his bedroom back home. The rent was astronomical for such a small space, but Bobby Joe just grinned and shook his landlord's hand, saying, "Well, I reckon it'll be just fine." That first night, Bobby Joe stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. The skyline was a jagged rhythm of illuminated windows, each light a story, a life. He felt a surge of both belonging and isolation, a paradox that seemed to define this city. New York was a place of dreams and hard truths, and he was here to chase his own, even if he wasn't quite sure what those were yet. The next morning, Bobby Joe set out to explore. He found himself in Times Square, surrounded by the blinding glow of digital billboards and the hustle of tourists and locals alike. He couldn't help but marvel at the energy, the sheer vibrancy of life around him. He bought a hot dog from a street vendor, savoring the first bite as he took in the sights and sounds of his new home. As the day wore on, Bobby Joe encountered the city's infamous challenges. He got lost more times than he cared to admit, navigated the subway with more luck than skill, and learned the hard way that not everyone appreciated a friendly chat in the elevator. But each mishap was met with his unwavering optimism and a hearty laugh that seemed to disarm even the sternest New Yorkers. That evening, as Bobby Joe sat on the roof of his apartment building, looking out over the city, he felt a deep sense of adventure stirring within him. New York was nothing like Alabama, with its open fields and slow, rolling rivers. Here, the rivers were of people, flowing through streets framed by steel and glass. Yet, in that moment, the city felt like a puzzle he was eager to solve, a melody he wanted to learn note by note. Yes, he missed home, but the excitement of the unknown was a powerful lure. Bobby Joe Jenkins, a small-town boy with a big heart, was ready to embrace New York City with all its chaos and beauty, and maybe, just maybe, find his place within it. Chapter 2. Jasmine maneuvered through the crowded streets of Midtown with her characteristic grace, despite the brisk pace of city life around her. Today, like any other, she was the epitome of efficiency and style, until her path was unexpectedly obstructed by Bobby Joe, whose southern charm was about to clash with the fast-paced world of New York. The collision was swift, a momentary lapse in the ballet of city foot traffic that resulted in Jasmine's coffee cascading down her blouse. Bobby Joe's immediate reaction was one of mortified apology, his southern accent thickening with each word of remorse. "I'm terribly sorry, ma'am. Let me buy you another coffee to make up for it," he offered, his tone earnest, hoping to amend the mishap. Jasmine, momentarily taken aback by the spill, but quickly regaining her composure, assessed the stranger before her. His genuine concern was apparent, but her day was already off schedule, and the unexpected interruption had frayed her nerves. "No need," she responded, a hint of steel in her voice. But there was something about his earnestness that piqued her interest, despite the inconvenience he had caused. Bobby Joe, undeterred by her refusal and eager to make amends, ventured another offer, hoping to navigate this unfamiliar territory with a gesture of goodwill. "How about I get you a new one with extra cream?" "On me, of course," he suggested, his smile hopeful. Jasmine couldn't help but raise an eyebrow at the assumption. "No, it's fine. And I take my coffee black, like me," she retorted, her tone firm yet laced with an undercurrent of amusement at his assumption. No cream, no sugar, just coffee. There was something about her feisty response that Bobby Joe found intriguing. It wasn't just her refusal of his offer, but the way she stood her ground, a stark contrast to the Southern belles he was accustomed to back home. Jasmine's independence and clear preference sparked a curiosity in him, a desire to know more about this woman who navigated the concrete jungle with such confidence. "Black coffee, then," Bobby Joe conceded with a chuckle, recognizing the minor defeat but intrigued by the challenge. "I admire that. Straight to the point, no frills." Jasmine, despite her initial irritation, found herself slightly amused by his persistence and the genuine regret that shone in his eyes. "Maybe next time, cowboy," she quipped, allowing a small smile to break through her composed exterior. The nickname was a playful jab at his out-of-place attire in the heart of Manhattan, yet it was delivered with a warmth that surprised her. As they parted ways, with Jasmine continuing on her path and Bobby Joe watching her disappear into the crowd, the brief encounter left a lasting impression. For Jasmine, it was a reminder that the city was full of surprises, some of them wearing cowboy hats and offering to buy coffee. For Bobby Joe, it was an introduction to the fierce independence and quick wit of New York women, a challenge he found himself unexpectedly eager to explore further. The coffee clash, as it would come to be remembered, was the first of many encounters between Jasmine and Bobby Joe. It was a collision not just of coffee, but of worlds, marking the beginning of a story that would weave together the fabric of their vastly different lives into something unexpectedly beautiful. Chapter 3. Bobby Joe Jenkins woke up to the sound of car horns and distant sirens, a symphony he was quickly learning to associate with the early hours in New York City. The sunlight barely peeked through the small window of his apartment, casting a warm glow on the unfamiliar walls that he was starting to call home. He stretched, his mind already buzzing with the possibilities of the day ahead. Despite the previous day's mishaps, his spirits remained unshaken. Today, he decided, he would embrace New York with open arms, ready to learn its rhythms and perhaps even add a bit of his own melody. After a breakfast of toast and instant coffee, a far cry from the hearty meals back home, Bobby Joe set out, determined to tackle the city's challenges head-on. His first stop was the local coffee shop he'd spotted the day before. As he pushed open the door, the bell chimed, announcing his entrance. The barista, a young woman with tattoos spiraling down her arms, looked up and gave him a nod. Bobby Joe approached the counter, his smile wide. "Morning, ma'am. Could I have a coffee, please? Black, no sugar," he requested, his accent drawing a curious look from the barista. "You got it. You're not from around here, are you?" she asked, her tone friendly. Bobby Joe chuckled. "Is it that obvious?" "Just a bit," she replied with a smirk, handing him his coffee. As Bobby Joe made his way through the city, he encountered its fast pace and the indifference of its inhabitants. He held doors open for people who rushed through without a glance, greeted strangers with a good morning, only to be met with puzzled looks, and found himself in a maze of streets that all seemed to lead nowhere. Yet, every misstep, every odd look, was met with his unwavering optimism and a hearty laugh that seemed out of place in the city's symphony of sounds. By midday, Bobby Joe found himself in Central Park, a green oasis amidst the concrete. He marveled at the expanse of nature, a stark contrast to the steel jungle surrounding it. Families picnicked, artists painted, and joggers darted past. Bobby Joe took a seat on a bench, taking in the scene, a contented sigh escaping his lips. It was here, in the unexpected calm of Central Park, that Bobby Joe struck up a conversation with an elderly man feeding the pigeons. The man, a lifelong New Yorker named Frank, shared stories of the city's past, painting a picture of a New York that Bobby Joe had never imagined. They talked for hours, the city's hustle and bustle fading into the background. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Bobby Joe said goodbye to his new friend and headed back to his apartment. The day had been full of lessons, both about the city and himself. He had navigated the subway without getting lost, discovered a love for street food, and made a friend in the most unlikely of places. That night, Bobby Joe penned a letter to his family back in Alabama, detailing his adventures and the colorful characters he'd met. He wrote of the challenges and the beauty of the city, of the moments of connection in the midst of anonymity. New York was starting to feel less like a daunting maze and more like a puzzle he was eager to solve. As he sealed the letter, Bobby Joe couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. He had ventured far from his comfort zone, but in doing so, he had found small pockets of warmth and humanity in the cold expanse of the city. And perhaps, he thought, that was the key to making New York feel like home. Chapter 4. The New York City streets buzzed with the anticipation of the upcoming Halloween festivities. Storefronts were adorned with ghoulish decorations, and the air carried a sense of excitement and mystery. Bobby Joe, who had never experienced Halloween in such a grand scale back in Alabama, was determined to immerse himself in the city's celebrations. He'd heard about a costume party happening in a popular downtown venue and decided it was the perfect opportunity to blend in and maybe, just maybe, make some new friends. After much deliberation and a call home for advice, Bobby Joe chose to honor his new home in the most literal way possible. He decided to dress up as the Big Apple itself. With a costume that was more endearing than accurate, complete with a makeshift stem hat and a green leafy collar, he stepped out into the night, his usual nervous excitement mixed with a dose of Halloween spirit. Meanwhile, Jasmine, always in tune with the city's pulse, had also decided to step out for the evening. Her approach to Halloween was less about costumes and more about observing the creative expressions of those around her. She chose a minimalist, chic cat costume, complete with subtle whiskers and elegant ears. It was a nod to the festivities without straying too far from her fashion-forward image. The party was in full swing by the time Bobby Joe arrived. The venue was a vibrant tapestry of colors and sounds, with costumes ranging from the spooky to the spectacular. Feeling slightly out of his depth, but buoyed by the anonymous camaraderie of the costume-clad crowd, Bobby Joe navigated through the party, his apple costume drawing amused glances and a surprising number of compliments. Across the room, Jasmine mingled with ease, her innate confidence making her a natural in the social scene. Yet, amidst the laughter and the music, her eyes were drawn to the earnest figure in the apple costume. There was something familiar about his demeanor, a warmth that stood out in the cool sophistication of the New York party scene. Their paths crossed near the makeshift bar, a serendipitous meeting that felt almost orchestrated by the playful spirits of Halloween. Jasmine, recognizing the man beneath the apple costume from their coffee spill encounter, couldn't help but smile. "Never thought I'd meet a walking, talking Big Apple," she teased, her tone light and curious. Bobby Joe, recognizing Jasmine despite her cat ears and painted whiskers, laughed, a genuine, hearty sound that seemed to cut through the noise of the party. "Well, I figured I should dress as something that represents my new home, though I'm not sure I'm doing it any justice," he replied, his humor self-deprecating and infectious. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, the initial amusement at Bobby Joe's costume giving way to a deeper connection. They found themselves sharing stories of their respective journeys to New York, their dreams, and the unexpected paths that life had taken them on. Bobby Joe's warmth and sincerity, so at odds with the city's stereotypical aloofness, intrigued Jasmine, while her ambition and clear-eyed view of the world challenged him in ways he hadn't anticipated. As the night wore on, the party's frenetic energy began to ebb, leaving them in a bubble of shared laughter and earnest conversation. They danced together, Bobby Joe's awkward yet endearing moves complementing Jasmine's natural grace. It was a night of unexpected revelations and the kind of genuine human connection that both had been unknowingly seeking. When the party finally wound down, and the costumes began to lose their charm in the harsh light of reality, Jasmine and Bobby Joe stepped out into the cool night air, the city's skyline a glittering backdrop to their reluctant goodbye. "Thank you for making this Alabama apple feel like he belongs in the Big Apple," Bobby Joe said, his voice tinged with gratitude and a hint of reluctance to end the night. Jasmine, her usual guardedness softened by the evening's revelations, smiled. "And thank you for showing me that sometimes the best parts of New York are the ones that don't fit the mold." They parted ways with a promise to meet again, the magic of Halloween having woven a thread of connection between two unlikely souls. As they disappeared into the night, each felt a renewed sense of wonder at the city's ability to surprise and delight, its streets a stage for stories yet unto. Chapter 5. The days following the Halloween party found both Jasmine and Bobby Joe caught up in the whirlwind of their respective lives, the memories of their serendipitous encounter simmering in the back of their minds. For Bobby Joe, the encounter with Jasmine had added a new layer to his New York adventure, a hint of possibility that made the city's challenges seem more surmountable. Jasmine, on her part, found herself unexpectedly looking forward to another chance meeting with the charming Southerner, a sentiment that puzzled her given her usual self-contained approach to relationships. Fate, it seemed, was more than willing to fan these embers of connection. A mutual friend, unaware of their recent acquaintance, gifted Jasmine a spot in an exclusive couples cooking class, insisting it was the perfect way to unwind. Due to a misunderstanding, Bobby Joe received the same gift, with the friend convinced that the experience would help him acclimate to the city and meet new people. Both arrived at the cooking class with differing expectations, only to find themselves paired together as a couple due to the booking error. The surprise and amusement at this mix-up dissolved any initial awkwardness, their shared laughter creating an immediate bond. The class was designed to teach the art of Italian cuisine, a challenge that put both of their culinary skills to the test. Jasmine, with her refined taste and eye for detail, was all about precision and presentation. Bobby Joe, on the other hand, approached the cooking with a sense of experimentation and a dash of Southern flair, much to the instructor's bemusement. As they navigated through the steps of making homemade pasta, the kitchen became a playground of flour fights, playful banter, and the occasional culinary misstep. Bobby Joe's attempts at kneading dough were comically inept, leading Jasmine to step in with guidance, her hands over his as they worked the dough together. The moment was charged with an intimacy neither expected, a simple touch sparking a connection deeper than either was prepared to acknowledge. Their pasta, much to their surprise and the instructor's relief, turned out to be delicious. As they sat down with the rest of the class to enjoy their creations, the conversation flowed as smoothly as the wine. They shared stories of their childhoods, their dreams, and the small, quirky details of their lives that rarely saw the light of day. The class ended, but their evening did not. Jasmine suggested a walk through the city, an offer Bobby Joe eagerly accepted. The streets of New York, usually so overwhelming, felt inviting and endless under the canopy of stars. They walked for hours, the city a backdrop to their growing camaraderie. As they finally said goodnight, the warmth of their farewell lingered in the cool air. The cooking class mix-up, a humorous twist of fate, had served to deepen their connection, revealing the layers beneath their initial impressions. For Jasmine, it was the realization that Bobby Joe's genuine kindness and joyful approach to life were qualities she admired more than she expected. For Bobby Joe, Jasmine represented a blend of strength and vulnerability that he found both intriguing and endearing. As they went their separate ways, the night felt like a promise, a tentative step towards something new and uncertain. The city around them, with its endless possibilities, seemed to whisper of potential chapters yet to unfold in their story. Chapter 6. In the wake of their unexpected reunion at the cooking class, Jasmine and Bobby Joe found themselves eager to spend more time together. Jasmine, with her deep knowledge of the city, proposed a day dedicated to exploring New York through each other's eyes. Bobby Joe, thrilled at the prospect of discovering more of the city with Jasmine as his guide, eagerly agreed. Their adventure began on a sunny Saturday morning, with Jasmine leading the way to one of her favorite hidden gems in the city, a small, tranquil park tucked away in the midst of Manhattan's hustle. Unlike the vast expanse of Central Park, this space felt intimate, a secret garden known only to those who sought refuge from the city's relentless pace. Bobby Joe was enchanted, seeing a side of New York he hadn't imagined existed. The park, with its winding paths and whispering trees, offered a serene backdrop to their morning. They talked easily, sharing stories of their lives, their ambitions, and the unexpected turns that had led them to where they were. Jasmine, usually so guarded, found herself opening up to Bobby Joe, drawn in by his earnest interest and his comforting presence. Eager to share his own slice of the city with Jasmine, Bobby Joe suggested their next stop, a quirky museum he'd discovered, dedicated to the history of magic, mysticism, and the occult. It was a far cry from the fashion-forward world Jasmine inhabited, yet she found herself intrigued by his enthusiasm. The museum was a labyrinth of oddities and wonders, each exhibit more bizarre and fascinating than the last. They marveled at ancient spellbooks, laughed over tales of historical hoaxes, and paused in awe before artifacts claimed to possess magical powers. The experience was a testament to the city's endless capacity for surprise, a quality that Jasmine had always loved about New York, but had somehow forgotten in the whirlwind of her daily life. As the day faded into evening, Jasmine and Bobby Joe found themselves at a rooftop bar, watching the sunset paint the skyline in hues of gold and pink. The city stretched out before them, a testament to dreams pursued and lives intertwined among the concrete and steel. The conversation turned reflective, with each acknowledging how the day had allowed them to see New York, and each other, in a new light. Jasmine admitted how much she appreciated Bobby Joe's fresh perspective on the city, his ability to find wonder in places she had overlooked. Bobby Joe, in turn, expressed his gratitude for Jasmine's guidance, for showing him sides of New York he could never have discovered on his own. As the night deepened, a comfortable silence settled between them, the kind that speaks of a connection that words can only begin to capture. The city around them buzzed with energy, yet, on that rooftop, it felt as though they were in a world of their own. Finally, as they prepared to part ways, there was a hesitancy, a reluctance to end the day that had brought them closer than either had anticipated. Jasmine looked up at Bobby Joe, the city lights reflecting in her eyes, and in that moment, it was clear that their adventure had been about more than just exploring New York. It had been a journey towards understanding each other, towards building a bond that was becoming harder to ignore. "Thank you for today," Jasmine said, her voice soft but sincere. "I can't remember the last time I saw the city like this." Bobby Joe smiled, warmth spreading through him at her words. "I reckon I should be thanking you. Today was something special." They parted with a promise to do it again soon, both knowing that their exploration of New York had only just begun. As they went their separate ways, the city seemed to wink at them, its endless possibilities a canvas on which their story was just starting to unfold. Chapter 7. The connection between Jasmine and Bobby Joe deepened as autumn turned to winter, painting New York in shades of gray and gold. Their friendship blossomed amidst the backdrop of the city's endless rhythm, each encounter revealing new facets of their personalities and pasts. Eager to share more of his world with Jasmine, Bobby Joe invited her to a country music bar that he had stumbled upon in the East Village. It was a small, cozy place, a slice of the South nestled in the heart of the city. Jasmine, whose musical tastes leaned more towards jazz and indie, accepted the invitation with a mix of curiosity and amusement. The night at the country bar was an eye-opener for Jasmine. The twang of guitars and the heartfelt lyrics transported her to a world she had never experienced. Watching Bobby Joe in his element, singing along and even taking her hand for a dance or two, she saw a side of him that was both vulnerable and joyously free. The energy was infectious, and she found herself swept up in the music, her preconceptions about country tunes slowly melting away under the warmth of the community and Bobby Joe's infectious enthusiasm. For Bobby Joe, sharing this piece of his heritage with Jasmine felt like a gift. Seeing her embrace the music and the atmosphere, her laughter ringing clear above the music, he felt a surge of happiness and a deepening bond between them. The night was a celebration of their differences and a testament to the unexpected ways in which they complemented each other. In turn, Jasmine invited Bobby Joe to a high-profile fashion event, a world away from the country music bar's laid-back charm. Bobby Joe accepted, his curiosity piqued about the glamorous industry Jasmine was a part of. The event was a dazzling affair, with models, designers, and celebrities mingling in a beautifully decorated loft overlooking the city. Bobby Joe, dressed in his best under Jasmine's guidance, felt out of his depth, but was determined to embrace the experience. Jasmine, radiant in a designer dress that seemed to capture the very essence of her, was his anchor in the sea of high fashion. Through her eyes, he saw the artistry and passion that drove the industry, the creativity and hard work behind the glamour. As Jasmine introduced Bobby Joe to her colleagues and friends, he was struck by her reputation and respect she commanded. Her world was one of beauty and constant evolution, a far cry from his laid-back life in Alabama, yet he found himself captivated by the vibrancy and ambition that fueled it. The evening was a whirlwind of conversation, laughter, and flashes of insight into a world Bobby Joe had never imagined he would be a part of. For Jasmine, having Bobby Joe by her side was a reminder of the world beyond the fashion industry's pressures, a grounding presence that brought her joy in the midst of her ambitious pursuits. As they left the event, walking through the city streets still buzzing with energy, they shared their thoughts on the night. Jasmine was touched by Bobby Joe's openness and appreciation for her world, while Bobby Joe was inspired by Jasmine's passion and success. Their exchange of worlds, from a country bar to a fashion event, had not only brought them closer, but also highlighted the beauty of their differences. It was a recognition that their diverse backgrounds and experiences could enrich their lives in unexpected and beautiful ways. As they said goodnight, the city around them seemed to echo their laughter and the promise of all the days to come. In sharing their worlds, Jasmine and Bobby Joe had discovered not just the depth of their connection but also the potential for their diverse paths to intertwine in the most beautiful of tapestries. Chapter 8. The crispness of early winter air was undercut by the tension that had started to build between Jasmine and Bobby Joe, ignited by a viral video that had captured the nation's attention. The video showed a confrontation between a white police officer and an African-American man, allegations of excessive force sparking heated debates across social media and dinner tables alike. They found themselves sitting across from each other in Jasmine's apartment, the remnants of a once cozy evening now giving way to a discussion that felt unavoidable. The video had come up casually at first, but as they delved deeper into the subject, the differences in their perspectives became starkly apparent. Bobby Joe, raised in a small town where respect for law enforcement was ingrained from a young age, argued the importance of compliance. "I just think, if the man had complied with the officer's orders, maybe things wouldn't have escalated," he said, his voice carrying a tone of what he hoped was reason. Jasmine's response was immediate, her voice tight with emotion. "Excuse you? That's easy for you to say, isn't it?" she countered, her words heavy with implications. "Compliance isn't always a guarantee of safety, and there are things, Bobby Joe, that you'll never really understand, fears you've never had to live with." The conversation shifted, gaining intensity as Jasmine pointed out the hypocrisy in arguing for compliance when, in other scenarios, individuals were prepared to take over government buildings by force, claiming rights and freedoms were being infringed upon. How can you advocate for compliance in one breath and then defend or ignore those who would use violence against the government in the next? She asked, her disappointment evident. Bobby Joe was taken aback, struggling to reconcile his belief in law and order with the contradictions Jasmine laid bare. He searched for a response, for a way to bridge the widening gap between their worldviews, but found himself at a loss. The complexities of the issue, intertwined with personal and cultural biases, seemed insurmountable in the moment. The conversation ended in a stalemate, both feeling the weight of unresolved tensions and unacknowledged biases. Jasmine, frustrated and saddened by Bobby Joe's inability to fully grasp the systemic issues at play, needed space to process her feelings. Bobby Joe, on the other hand, was left to confront uncomfortable questions about his beliefs and the realities he had never been forced to consider. As they parted ways for the night, the chilly air between them felt colder than the winter outside. The viral video had opened a rift, revealing deep-seated differences that went beyond simple disagreement. It was a reminder of the work they still had to do, both as individuals and as a couple, to truly understand and support each other. The night ended not with anger, but with a somber acknowledgement of the complexities of navigating a relationship across cultural and experiential divides. The challenge before them was clear. They would need to find a way to bridge their differences, to engage in difficult conversations without losing sight of the love and respect that had brought them together. But on that cold winter night, the path forward seemed uncertain, a reflection of the broader societal divisions that the viral video had so starkly illuminated. Chapter 9. In the days following their tense conversation, Jasmine and Bobby Joe found themselves ensnared in a web of silence, each navigating the discomfort of unresolved conflict. The space between them, once filled with laughter and shared dreams, now echoed with the words left unsaid. They moved through their separate lives, avoiding the places where their paths might cross, each lost in a sea of reflection. It was during this period of avoidance that an international news story captured the attention of the nation. A unit of U.S. troops, composed of soldiers from a diverse array of racial and cultural backgrounds, found themselves in a perilous situation overseas. The coverage highlighted not just the danger they faced, but the unity and brotherhood among the soldiers, a poignant reminder of the strength found in diversity. Jasmine watched the news from her apartment, the images of the soldiers working together, relying on each other for survival, striking a chord within her. It was a stark contrast to the division and conflict that seemed so prevalent back home. The story brought into focus the broader picture, the shared humanity that transcended political and social biases. Bobby Joe, too, found himself drawn to the news coverage. Seeing the soldiers, men and women of different races and backgrounds, standing shoulder to shoulder against a common threat, he couldn't help but reflect on his conversation with Jasmine. The realization dawned on him that their shared values, their common humanity, were far more significant than the differences that had driven a wedge between them. With these thoughts heavy on their minds, fate intervened, leading Jasmine and Bobby Joe to bump into each other on the street, in a manner eerily reminiscent of their first meeting. The surprise encounter, under the soft glow of the city lights, felt like a sign, a nudge towards reconciliation. Bobby Joe, seizing the moment, offered to buy Jasmine a coffee, a gesture towards mending the rift between them. Jasmine, her heart warmed by the offer, suggested, "Coffee with a little cream, please." Her words were more than just a preference. They were a metaphor for the beauty and diversity, a subtle acknowledgement of the lesson they were both coming to terms with. As they sat down in the cozy cafe, the same one where they had shared many of their early conversations, they began to talk. It was a tentative dialogue at first, each cautiously navigating the sensitive topics that had previously driven them apart. But as they spoke, they found themselves returning to the common ground that had united them in the first place, a shared belief in compassion, in the importance of understanding, and in the value of diversity. The conversation flowed more easily than either had anticipated, the news story of the soldiers serving as a bridge, a reminder that unity in the face of adversity was not just possible, but powerful. They discussed their views, their fears, and their hopes, finding that their differences, while real, were not insurmountable. As they left the cafe, the city around them seemed to mirror their renewed connection. The streets, once a backdrop to their avoidance, now felt like a canvas of possibilities. The chance encounter that had brought them back together was a testament to the unpredictability of life and the paths that lead back to understanding and love. Jasmine and Bobby Joe walked together, their steps in sync, a symbol of their decision to move forward, embracing the complexity of their relationship and the world around them. The coffee with cream, a simple choice with profound implications, was a reminder of their journey. A journey marked by challenges, but defined by their willingness to see the beauty in their diversity. Chapter 10. As winter unfurled its chilly embrace over the city, Jasmine and Bobby Joe found themselves navigating a newfound understanding, their relationship strengthened by the recent trials and their commitment to seeing the beauty in their diversity. With the year drawing to a close and the spirit of renewal in the air, they decided to host a New Year's Eve gathering, a celebration of new beginnings and the rich tapestry of their shared experiences. The theme for the evening was Blended Brews, a nod to their coffee shop reconciliation and the metaphorical blending of their differences into something richer. The invitation promised a night of eclectic music, diverse flavors, and a coffee tasting that boasted blends from around the world, each with its unique story, much like the guests themselves. Their friends from various circles, fashion, music, community activism, and those they'd met during their community project, arrived, creating a vibrant mosaic of personalities in Jasmine's artfully decorated loft. The space buzzed with laughter and the clinking of glasses as stories from the past year were shared and toasted. The highlight of the evening was, undoubtedly, the coffee tasting. Bobby Joe, ever the enthusiast for a bit of flair, donned a barista apron and a fake Italian mustache, proclaiming himself the maestro of mocha, a title he had just invented but took very seriously. Jasmine, equally amused and embarrassed by his theatrics, played along, introducing each blend with an exaggerated accent that wandered inexplicably from French to Russian, much to the delight of their guests. As the countdown to midnight began, everyone gathered around, cups of their chosen blend in hand. The room buzzed with anticipation, the air filled with the rich aroma of coffee and the warmth of shared laughter. 3, 2, 1, Happy New Year! The cheer that erupted was followed by the clinking of coffee cups instead of champagne glasses, a unique twist that perfectly encapsulated the essence of their celebration. As the laughter died down, Jasmine turned to find Bobby Joe offering her a cup with a special blend he had concocted just for her. "I call it the Jazz Joe blend," he announced with a proud grin. "It's bold and beautiful, with a hint of sweetness and a dash of spice, just like us." Jasmine took a sip, her expression one of pleasant surprise followed by mock seriousness. It's almost perfect," she teased, "but I think it's missing something." Bobby Joe's eyes widened in mock horror. "Missing something? Impossible. The maestro of mocha never misses anything." With a playful glint in her eye, Jasmine reached over to the table and picked up a tiny bottle of cream. "Just a dash," she said, pouring a little into the cup. "There, now it's perfect, blended just right." The laughter that followed was a testament to their journey, a blend of challenges and triumphs, differences and common ground. As they stood together, sipping their perfectly blended brew, they were reminded of the beauty and diversity and the strength of their love, ready to face whatever the new year might bring. The party continued into the early hours, filled with laughter, dancing, and, of course, more coffee concoctions than anyone could have imagined. It was a celebration of love, understanding, and the joy of finding common ground, even if it was just in their coffee preferences. As Jasmine and Bobby Joe looked around at their friends, their hearts full of hope and happiness, they knew that no matter what the future held, they would navigate it together, blending their differences into a stronger, more beautiful whole. And if they ever found themselves at odds again, they had the perfect solution: a cup of coffee, blended just right, to remind them of the night they celebrated their blended brews and new beginnings.
If you like this audiobook, please like and subscribe and leave a comment.